Recording in progress.
Okay, so I've got the recording on now. So welcome to today's Clear Insight Lunch and Learn. If we haven't met before, my name is Julie Cullen and I specialise in helping women build their confidence in the workplace. If you haven't already said hello in the chat bar, please do. That's where all the conversation takes place. So let me know who you are, where you're watching from. Let me know if this is your first time, if you're a newbie, or if you've been here before. I can see some familiar names already. Okay, so I do these every Friday lunchtime, UK time. If you are interested in some of my previous workshops or lunch and learns, I'm going to, there you go, there's a link in the chat bar. So you can go there, you can look at my back catalogue of all the different lunch and learns we've done. It's nicer to have you here live, but if you can't make it, there's always the replay. If you are watching this on replay and you want to see some of the other ones, there should be a link below this video that you can go and register to see the whole back catalogue. So today we are talking about negotiating with confidence, and I'm going to introduce you to my PACE framework, PACE, P-A-C-E, PACE framework, to help you do that. But before we start, one of the things I want you to get thinking about is how do you feel at the thought of negotiating? So tell me, what is it for you? How does it feel? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you get all stressed and anxious? Maybe you feel like what you want to say never comes out right. Maybe you feel like negotiating is a confrontation and you hate confrontation. So let me know, type in the comments. What's the emotions and feelings that spring into your mind when you hear the word negotiate? And even if you're not watching this live, feel free to comment below this video. I am always checking to see what other people are saying. So let me know. And I want you to start thinking about what negotiation is, because negotiation is not just about big deal making. Negotiations take place in your everyday life. So think about different situations in which you need to negotiate. You could be negotiating to buy a car, to increase your salary, to resolve a family conflict. Maybe you're negotiating with buyers or suppliers, clients. Maybe you're negotiating with your child as they're having a tantrum and you need them to do what you want them to do. So think about these are all different negotiation situations. And different scenarios can trigger a different set of emotions. So it's important that you understand what your emotions are in different negotiating situations. So what happens when you think about negotiation? Let me know in the comments. Does your stomach turn into knots at the mere thought of sitting across from someone, be it a boss, a friend, a significant other, a client, ready to put your points to them? Do you immediately think about going into battle, going backward and forth with the other person, zapping your energy and wearing you down? You know, you're often emotionally charged when you go into certain types of negotiation, and it's important to understand that and be able to deal with your emotions. It's also important to consider the emotional state of the other person you're negotiating with and how to deal with that. And I'll explain why later. You know, in my corporate job, I used to work directly with our larger clients. And so there was one particular client whose negotiating position was quite aggressive. It was their chosen style for the company. And some individuals within the company played it extremely well. Some overplayed it, which caused problems in the negotiation. And others felt really uncomfortable playing the aggressor because it wasn't their natural style. But they were kind of encouraged to do so because it was the company style. But the thing I needed to remember in that situation was that it was simply a style of negotiation. Right? It wasn't personal towards me. It wasn't personal towards the company I worked for. It was simply a negotiation tactic that they used. So it's always good to take some time to consider how you're going to feel going into negotiation and how the other person might feel, and whether or not they might play tactical games as part of that as well, and how that might affect the outcome. Two of the most typical emotions people can feel during a negotiation is anxiety. So when you feel anxious, you want to get out of the situation as quickly as possible, which can lead you to making poor decisions and agreements just to get out of there. You know, you might take a week offer in the hope of just getting a yes so you can leave. Or you might accept a poor offer for the same reason, paying a higher price than necessary or accepting terms you don't really like. So anxiety creates a situation in which you don't achieve the best outcome for you, and it leaves you exposed to be taken advantage of. That's something to be careful of. So type in the comments, do you feel anxious when you think about negotiation? At the opposite end of the spectrum, there's the emotional anger and aggression that can occur. So when it comes to negotiating, many people believe that anger can be a productive emotion, one that will help them win a larger share of the pie. Now, this comes from a tendency to think of a negotiation in competitive terms rather than collaborative ones. And researchers call this fixed pie basis. So some people assume that a negotiation is a zero-sum game in which their interests are going to conflict directly with the other person's interests. But what research shows us is that if you go in with anger, then that can harm the process because it can escalate the conflicts. It creates biased perceptions, and it's more likely to lead to an impasse. So showing anger in a negotiation can damage the long-term relationship between both parties, and it can reduce trust. So using anger as a negotiating tactic is not always the best way to approach things. So let me know in the comments if any of that resonates. What does it mean for you when you think of the word negotiating? Is it emotional for you? Because if you enter a negotiation from either end of the spectrum, whether it's anxiety or anger, it's not good. So you want to be aware of what emotional states you go into when negotiating. And think about it in terms of different situations as well. Like, do you become really anxious when negotiating in the workplace? But what about at home? Maybe you're a little bit more aggressive or angry when you're negotiating with a partner or a child. Raise your awareness of your emotional state. And what I'm going to share with you today is my PACE framework. So PACE, PACE framework, to help you do that. And it's designed to help you approach your negotiation in a much calmer and more confident way. It's an acronym. We love acronyms. So when you think about negotiation, I want you to think about pacing yourself. Easy way to remember it. I know, bit naff, but there we go. Okay, so I've seen a few people joined in, so please type in the comments. Let me know what kind of negotiations you struggle with and what kind of emotions you feel when you think about those kind of negotiations. So P in PACE is for preparation, plan, practice. Preparation, plan, practice, right, is the key to success in negotiations. It's vital to think about what the objective of the negotiation is. What do you want out of it? What does the other person want out of it? Think about that ahead. Not just the obvious things either. So say, for example, you're going to buy a car. You want the best price you can get, the salesperson wants the best price they can get. But is that the only things that matter in the negotiation? You might need to purchase by a certain date. Or there may be certain features or functions you want included. The sales guy might have to make a sale by a certain date to meet their targets. Or they may want to clear out old stock to make room for new, so they've been given more leverage to negotiate. So you have to think about the objectives and prepare a strategy. Don't just go into a negotiation planning to wing it once you get there. And practicing this makes it so much easier. The more you negotiate, the better you get at it. So if you can, find situations in which to practice your negotiating skills. Just try it out. Like when you're out shopping, negotiate discounts. Negotiate in the house is a great place to do it with your partner, your kids, siblings, whatever, for things that you would like them to do more often or not do. So rather than shout and complain at what they do and don't do, try using that to practice your negotiation tactics. See if you get a good outcome for both of you. Get into that habit of practicing. You know, if you're frustrated that your partner isn't doing a fair share around the house or your children aren't doing a fair share around the house, this can often become a very emotional screaming match where you just shout at each other and nothing ever gets resolved. So think about how you could approach the subject differently in terms of a negotiation. What do you want out of the conversation? What would they like out of the conversation? What are your wants and compromises? What might theirs be? Negotiating at home can be a really good place to practice this and hone your skills if it's something you don't get a lot of practice at in the workplace. But I would also suggest that you try it at work because that's where you're more likely to need it. So in meetings with your boss, why not try negotiating for some small wins like flexible work terms? Maybe you want to start late or finish early. Maybe you want to work from home every now and again, or you want to do condensed hours. Think about some things that you might like to get that you would want to negotiate for. And practicing small, as I say, will help you feel more comfortable and confident when you're going to negotiate for bigger wins, such as pay increases, promotions, sales, new opportunities. Okay, so P, prepare, plan, practice. Look for opportunities to practice and hone your skills. A, from PACE. Stands for agreement. A negotiation is not an argument, it's an agreement. It's nothing more than two parties or more coming together. So if the word negotiate sends you into a tailspin, I want you to change your mindset and your relationship with that word. From now on, just think of a negotiation as nothing more than a conversation that leads to an agreement. Because that's all it is. It's a conversation in which you want something and the other person wants something and you're working out a solution that you can both agree with. It's not a battle. There doesn't have to be a winner or a loser. You both want to walk away with an agreement that you're both comfortable with. And I use the word comfortable deliberately. Okay, so in a negotiation, you may not get exactly what you want, they may not get exactly what they want, but you've come to an agreement that you can both accept. And that's really important. So when you're doing your preparation, spend some time considering what you would agree to, what you'd be willing to compromise, and what are your deal breakers? What are you not willing to compromise on? And also consider that from the other person's perspective. What do you think they might be willing to compromise on? What do you think their non-negotiables are? And so what you're doing is you're approaching the negotiation from the perspective of you're coming in to have a conversation in which both of you want to come to a mutually acceptable agreement. Regardless of how the other person approaches the negotiation, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but your approach is that you're wanting to come out with a mutually acceptable agreement. It's the way everyone should actually approach a conversation around negotiation. Okay, P, preparation. A, it's an agreement, not an argument. C, control. If you normally become highly emotionally charged when negotiating, or just even when thinking about negotiating, you need to decide how you're going to prepare for that. So one of the things I teach my clients in my confidence coaching is how to deal with that runaway train of thought that charges through our minds when we become highly emotional. When that starts to happen, you need a process to interrupt that train of thought. Otherwise, you lose focus on the negotiation and the emotions take over. So if you're anxious, then you likely move into flight mode, where once that emotional state starts, you just want to get out there as quickly as possible. And you may end up agreeing to terms that are not necessarily what you wanted, but just as a means to get out of the room. If you're angry, then you stop listening to what the other person is saying and you start demanding rather than negotiating for what you want. which can lead to an impasse and neither party coming to an agreement. So when you're doing your preparation, decide how you're going to deal with your emotion when it occurs. And there are a number of ways you can interrupt your emotional state. So I want you to think about this situation, which you may have been in before. Okay, this is all about how you interrupt your emotional state when your thoughts start running away from you. Okay, so imagine you're sitting in the cinema watching a really scary movie. The movie's building up to the climax, that big scary moment. The atmosphere becomes dark and menacing. The music starts getting faster and louder as the danger draws near. You're holding your breath as the star on the screen is heading for certain danger. Then somebody's phone rings. And everyone is distracted by the phone. Several people are making their opinions known, and the moment is lost. So you've been distracted, you switch back to the movie, but the momentum of the fear and the build-up is gone. That emotional state you'd gotten yourself into, the movie that it put you into, your thought pattern has been interrupted. Your thinking brain is back in control of your emotional brain, and you can't get back into that state of feeling the excitement and the fear that you were enjoying as part of the movie experience. Right, hands up, let me know in the comments if you've ever been in that situation or something similar. So that's a natural situation where your emotional state has been interrupted by something. And so what you want to learn to do, some of the things I teach in my coaching, is how you then do that for yourself. It's a little bit harder, but you can do that where you have something that interrupts that emotional state. And it's useful it's essential actually to plan ahead to know what your process is going to be. So for example, if it's just you alone, there's nobody else that can interrupt the pattern for you, what could you do? Is there something physical you could do, like you see some people wearing the wristbands and they snap the wristband? Usually that's because they're trying to interrupt some kind of habit pattern, whether it's an emotional one or a habit such as trying to quit some kind of bad habit. But yeah, some kind of physical, having a touch point, you see some people tapping, some kind of physical thing that you do that will remind you to snap out of that emotional state. Or you could choose to give yourself that pause, so mentally come out of the emotional state by just asking the other person a question. Just to stop yourself from talking, to take that pause to allow you to collect your thoughts, to calm yourself down. Okay, now many of you will find this difficult initially, and this is why practice is so important. But you want to go through that practice of where you're planning and changing your emotion and mindset to help you feel more confident. And it's one of the things I teach a couple of different techniques for doing this in my Create a More Confident You program, because it's really essential to be able to bring that emotional state out of the negotiation. And again, practice it at home. That's where a lot of very charged conversations take place. So if you find that you have charged conversations persistently with someone in your family or a friend, then especially if it tends to lead to an argument, then try and take that trigger into that situation so that you can remove yourself from the emotional feeling and get yourself back in a calm state before you lose your top and start shouting and bawling. And actually it's a good step to take that further and learn how to interrupt the pattern of another person. So again, if you're in a situation where conversations often lead to arguments, then don't allow yourself to, if the other person goes into an argumentative state, then how can you help them by interrupting their pattern rather than just reflecting and going into argument yourself? Okay, so think about that. So far from the PACE framework, we've done P, prepare, plan, practice. A, it's an agreement, not an argument. C, control your emotions. Find the technique that works for you to control your emotions. Come work with me, I will help you teach those techniques. But learn to control your emotions. And then finally, E. What's your emotional strategy? So most people plan for their tactical strategy when they're going into negotiating. What do they want? What do they not want? What are they prepared to give and take? But very few people prepare for that emotional situation. So you've already thought about the emotions that you're likely to feel in each situation, whether it's the anxiety or the anger, and what you're going to do to try and interrupt that pattern and control that pattern. You also want to think about how you react to the emotions of the other person during negotiation, as I kind of hinted at earlier. What will you do if they become anxious, angry, or upset? So plan for it. Your emotional strategy should take into consideration the impact of both parties during the negotiation, not just yourself. So if the other person becomes angry, what could you do to calm them down? You might not think it's your responsibility, but if you want a good outcome, you'll certainly be able to do that better if you can reduce the hostility. If you can't calm them down, is it better to bring the meeting to a close and agree to come back at a later date? I had a client that the negotiating tactic was very bullish, verging on the aggressive. And he would come into the room quite aggressive, demanding what he wanted and dismissing any attempts to negotiate. He came from the standpoint of, this is what I want, and I'm not willing to compromise. I'm expecting you to come to meet me. I'm not going to try and come to meet you. And what I learned was, well, that was his style. And what I needed to do, I can't change his style. I can try to calm the situation, but he was quite persistent in his aggressive stance. So what I needed to do was to allow the steam to run out. Okay, so I would listen to his demands. I would gain clarity on his position. And I would often end that initial meeting by agreeing to come back to him without even attempting to negotiate my position, without even coming to the table with what I expected or what I wanted. The first meeting, I would just let him have his moment, let him lay his cards on the table. Then I knew exactly the position he was coming from, and that would give me the leverage in the follow-up meetings to discuss that. So I'd given him the opportunity to take the dominant position in that initial meeting, which then opened up the opportunity for further conversation that would lead to negotiation. But he needed that initial, I'm taking control, I'm taking the lead, and I allowed him to have that position. I didn't get aggressive with him. I didn't try to force my opinion on him. I didn't do anything other than listen, take notes, and agree to see what I could do, and then come back to it later on. Okay, so think about the other person, how you're going to respond to that. And what if it's at the opposite end of the spectrum? What if you recognise it's the other person that feels anxious when you go into negotiation? What can you do to make them feel more at ease? You're looking to negotiate positively with the other person to have a good outcome and maintain a good relationship. So you don't want to leave them feeling like you took advantage of them. If you see somebody's nervous, especially if you know how it feels to feel that lack of confidence, then help them. Don't take advantage. So spend a bit of time creating a strategy for how you manage your emotional state and how you respond should the other person become emotional. Okay, so I've talked a lot. There's been very little chat in the chat bar today. This is your last chance. If you've got any questions, get them in now, because I'm going to wrap up. And as mentioned before, if you're watching this on replay, stick the comments in below the video. I do check every now and again, and I will respond to you. Okay, so the PACE framework. Pace yourself when going into a negotiation. Prepare, plan, practice. P. A. It's an agreement, not an argument. If you don't like the word negotiate, then just think of it as an agreement in which you're both trying to come up with benefit to both. C. Control. Control your emotions and have a strategy for if you start to get into that emotional state, have that strategy of how you're going to get yourself out of it. How are you going to change that train of thought? What's your trigger? And then E, your emotional strategy. Plan ahead. If you are going to get emotional, how are you going to respond to that? If the other person gets emotional, how are you going to respond to it? You want to think about both. Okay, so I see a question coming in. Teresa, if the other person doesn't want to negotiate, what do you do? Okay, are you able to give any more detail on that, Teresa? So, for example, the example that I gave earlier of the individual that they used to come in with an aggressive stance, in that situation, in the follow-ups, it really would be about then how do I have that follow-on conversation? So I already know what he's brought to the table because he's been very aggressive and has refused to have any kind of conversation other than tell me exactly what he expects. So when we come back in, or when you come back in, this is the follow-up meeting, then you're better prepared because if you work for a large company or even a small company, but if you work for a company, you've maybe gone back and said, right, this is the position they're taking. So where are we on that? And then you bring it to the table. Now, at the second conversation, you can bring it to the table and they might still not move. But you both know each other's position. At some point, someone does have to move. And that's where you try to find that collaborating point. I don't think I've ever been in a negotiation where someone has outright refused to move at all. If they do, and you work in a large company, or if you work for a company, then it tends to then become an escalation where other levels within the companies, both companies may have to get involved if the two of you can't come to an agreement. But I would always try and find that sweet point where you can both try to resolve it between each other. I have been in the situation where it was actually a negotiation within my own company, so two different organisations within the same company were refusing to come to agreement. And so my organisation made a decision and we went with it, knowing that it was going to cause a problem with the relationship. We had to accept that was going to happen because we couldn't move. There was no movement on the other side. They refused to come to the table. So we had to then sort of be a bit bullish in that situation. But it is quite rare. So you give me some more details. One occasion I had to think on my compromise position before talking to my line manager. It was with my boss who didn't want to give me time in lieu. So I had to give just half day instead of 1 day. And that's a difficult one if the other person is your manager. Oh, you're welcome. just got a thanks there for the example. Yeah, so when it's your manager, that can become quite difficult. And I like the fact that actually that you did come to a compromise, which is really, really good. If you're willing to have a compromise, and sometimes if you feel the other person is likely not to compromise, then maybe you go in asking for more, knowing that you're willing to compromise down, then they feel that they've won the negotiation, for want of a better word, where in actual fact you've gotten what you wanted, but you went in asking for more, knowing that it was going to be hard to bring them to an agreement. So that's where the planning and preparation and knowing the person you're negotiating with obviously helps that a lot. So the likes of your boss, yeah, if you knew that they were unlikely to give you what you were wanting, if you went in and asked for it straight, you could ask for something more, and then they believe they've negotiated you down to something that they're willing to give to you. And that's another example. Unfortunately, again, in the workplace, there may come a point where you have to pull in other people to the conversation, like maybe someone from HR or the next management level above. You're always trying to negotiate a win-win. I'm not saying that the other party will always collaborate with you on that. Most of the time they will, sometimes they won't. But the planning and preparation helps you think about the different scenarios and what you might do if it becomes a stalemate. And how do you get past that block? Is it something that you can do yourself? Is it something you have to bring other parties to the table to help you to do? And if you have to get into that situation, I just want to touch on this, sorry, I know we're on a half hour now, but just to round up, if you find yourself in a situation where you and the other party can't come to an agreement, so this is workplace related, then it's not a failure to pull in other resources to have that conversation. That actually in itself can be a negotiating tactic. So sometimes that people will come to the table knowing that there's only so far they can go, and you know there's only so far you can go, but you actually know you can pull in someone else to give you a more leverage, or you can pull in someone else to make an approval. Like, have you ever been in for a car when you're in a dealership and you're negotiating with the salesperson? They keep disappearing off to their manager's office for their manager's approval to make you a new offer, and then you ask for something else and they go back into them. Have you ever done that? Let me know. If you've ever negotiated for a car, this is a great example of where to go and practice it. Even if you're not going to buy a car, just try and see what the best offer is you can get, knowing that you're going to walk away and not buy it. Because it is a game, it's a tactic, and they're going at the boss, but they already know how far they're willing to go. But he needs you to think that you've pushed him into an escalation where he needs permission from his boss. It's a bit of a gameplay. Okay, so thank you for your thanks there. I hope that helped, Teresa. Okay, so now if you do feel like confidence is an issue for you and you would like to come with me on a journey to grow your confidence, please let me know. I have a group coaching program that is starting in January, but there's currently a special year-end offer that I'm making on price. So it's normally $497. It's currently an offer for $299 if you sign up before the end of the year. So if you want to know, just get in touch. You know where I am, or you can head over to my website, juliecullen.co.uk, and you'll see information in there. So if confidence is one of your challenges, maybe this year is the time to decide that you're going to do something about it. Okay, so thank you for the feedback, Teresa. I really appreciate that. I don't know where the other registrants ended up, because I do know I had more people registered, but I've been watching the wait room. Nobody has come in, so hopefully they'll catch up on the replay. So once again, use the framework: PACE, prepare, agree, control, emotional strategy. Great way to remember. Pace yourself when you're going into network. Okay, so thanks for watching. Thank you for turning up live. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. Have a great weekend. Oh, sorry. Next week. What is next week's? Next week's Lunch and Learn is networking with confidence. So I know some of you have some challenges around networking. I'm just putting a link into the chat bar now. So that is where you can go and register for the Zoom meeting if you want to sign up live. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up there. Thank you very much for watching, and see, hopefully, some of you again next week. Bye for now.